After the Second World War, Europe was simply destroyed. Not only the buildings and the manufacturing facilities, but also the agricultural system as well as the transport network. There was nothing left. Nothing left working, and Europe was a field of ruins. In order to re-establish the world economic wealth and ensure that there would be political stability and peace, the US government soon came out with what you might have heard of as the Marshall Plan. It was named after General George Marshall, who helped develop and win support for this idea. 3 years after the end of the war, the United States injected into Europe some $13 billion in money, in food, and in equipment. The distribution of food and equipment was, however, hindered by the fact that all transports were quasi-inexistent. The European Recovery Program, ERP, which is the real and official name of the Marshall Plan, sought, however, the construction of the reconstruction of an integrated European society through trade, which not only was helping Europeans, but also found different motivations, namely three main ones. First, the idea was to restructure normal trading circuits in Europe. Two, of course, also find a new market for the US products that were, of course, sold to the Europeans. And three, and finally, guarantee the US government against the fact that Europe would collapse and fall in the hands of the Soviet Union and the Eastern European communist parties. The financial deal was dictated by the US in what is called as Bretton Woods, and Europe ended up making massive borrowings to the US. There was, of course, a lot of critics of the Marshall Plan. And these critics ranged from claiming that the Marshall Plan prevented the necessary reforms regarding centralized planning in particular. It went into considering that it was not necessary in any case because the economic growth had started again immediately after the war, and the capacity for Central European banks to finance the government's investments. And there was even people to consider that the United States had, in fact, through the Marshall Plan, had found a very good excuse to put Europe under administrative supervision. So there was all sorts of people disregarding this plan. Whatever the real American motivation was, the plan that later led to the construction of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, in 1949, and was perceived by Moscow as a threat to which Russians answered in 1955 with the creation of the Warsaw Pact, regrouping in Eastern countries. This division of Europe was made highly visible by the construction of what you all know, the Berlin Wall, as Winston Churchill named it, the Iron Curtain. And once Europe was being divided on the international scene, a succession of events and key personalities were working very hard on the construction of a political project and the unifications of the various countries constituting Europe at the time, because it was not yet the EU. There are some dates and events, as well as some key people who are part of our European heritage and better lead to understand who we are in 2019 and why the European situation is as it is nowadays. So, key facts and figures. As early as 1944, Benelux was formed between Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. It was based on the concept of putting an end to custom barriers at their borders and ensuring free movement of persons, goods, and services between the three countries, with the goal of a unified economic policy and common market. It led in 1958 to the signing of a treaty establishing the Benelux Economic Union. In 1949-1950, French Foreign Minister Robert Schuman made a series of speeches announcing the creation of a supranational European community, which directly led in 1951 to the creation of the European Coal and Steel Community. The Treaty of Rome in 1957 established the European Economic Community between 6 Western European states with the goal of unified economic policy and common market. In 1967, the EEC, the European Coal and Steel Community, and Euratom merged to form the European Community, which in 1993 became the European Union, the EU. 1979 saw the election of the first European Parliament, we'll talk about it later on, soon followed by the creation of the European Court and the Central Bank. I will explain you all this later on. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell under Gorbachev presidency of Russia, and in 1992, the Maastricht Treaty was signed by the members of the European communities to further carry on European integration. The treaty founded the European Union and established its pillar structure, which stayed in place until the Lisbon Treaty that came into force in 2009. Europe also greatly expanded the competencies of the EU and led to the creation of the single European currency. You all know the euro. Between 2004 and 2013, more Central and Eastern European countries began joining the EU, expanding it to its current size of 28 member states, the MS member states. And in June 2016, you've all heard of it, the people of the United Kingdom, in a non-binding referendum on EU membership, voted Brexit to leave the European Union. And so this is where we stand today. I actually enclose a link to a very well done video made about the EU since the Second World War. It will remind you where we come from and who we are now together as EU citizens. Enjoy the video.